SLT එක්ක ස්පීඩ් අප් වෙන්න. සුපර් ඩීල්ස් අත්විඳින්න. SLT ස්පීඩ් අප් සුපර් ඩීල්ස් සැප්තැම්බර් 30 දක්වා පමණයි.
Tonight, retribution from the United Nations. Sri Lankan peacekeepers banned with immediate effect. The fight is on. Sajith Premadasa named as the contender in the race for the president's office. Simplifying tax. Gotabaya Rajapaksa pledges to repeal the existing tax system under his government. What's the point of FTA? India accused of imposing unrealistic minimum import price on Sri Lankan pepper and areca nut. All that and much more coming up on First at 9 this Thursday, the 26th of September 2019.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9.
මුහුණ සති කීපයකට කලින් Fair and Lovely men ගෑවට පස්සේ මාක්ස් අඩු වෙලා ෆෑනස් වැඩි වෙලා.
මාක්ස් අඩු කරලා ඔයාගේ ෆෑනස් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් එක වැඩි කරගන්න. Fair and Lovely men anti marks cream.
Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Kanaka. Let's start with your local stories. Now, the long-awaited decision has finally been made. Any doubts on the UNP's presidential candidate were finally put to rest today after the UNP Working Committee gathered as promised to make their choice. Party members agreed unanimously on naming Deputy Leader Minister Sajith Premadasa as the candidate to represent the UNP-led alliance, the United National Front. Newly declared UNF candidate Premadasa later revealed to media that he will contest under the symbol of swan. Incidentally, President Maithripala Sirisena also contested under the same symbol during the 2015 presidential poll.
Senior members of the UNP and leader of the party, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, held a meeting at the Temple Trees this morning. Its participants also included Deputy Leader of the UNP Minister Sajith Premadasa, General Secretary Minister Akila Viraj Karyavasam, Chairman Minister Kabir Hashim, Ministers Ravi Karunanayaka, Dr. Rajitha Senaratne, Ranjit Madhuma Bandara and Navin Desanayake. Minister Premadasa had expressed strong opposition over the conditional opportunity extended to him by senior members of the party to contest in the presidential election as the party's chosen candidate. With that being the case, an agreement was struck securing Prime Minister Wickremesinghe's position as the party leader while ensuring his candidacy for the premiership, as Minister Premadasa was handed the presidential candidacy. The agreement also ensured that no changes will be made to positions within the party.
All of us unanimously agreed to name Minister Sajith Premadasa as the presidential candidate. There were no conditions. We did come to certain agreements. We will move forward accordingly.
Following this meeting, the Working Committee of the UNP convened at 3 p.m. at the UNP headquarters in Colombo. During the meeting, UNP leader Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe named Deputy Leader Minister Sajith Premadasa as the candidate who will represent the United National Front in the upcoming presidential election.
We had a discussion in the meeting. Most agreed that the party must not be divided during the presidential election. This is why we must follow party principles when moving forward. The majority agreed on appointing Deputy Leader of the party, Minister Sajith Premadasa, as the presidential candidate. There should be amendments in our party constitution. Several parties which support us requested to make a statement regarding the matter. Let all parties get together to prepare for the election then.
Addressing a media briefing immediately after the Working Committee meeting, General Secretary of the party, Minister Akila Viraj Karyavasam, revealed several other proposals which were agreed upon, in addition to those that were considered during the meeting this morning.
We also agreed to continue with our constitutional amendments on devolution of power, electoral system and an executive presidency which will follow the Prime Minister's instructions. We will consider views by everybody regarding the matter.
මේ සම්බන්ධව සියලු පාර්ශ්වයන්ගේ අදහස් සැලකිල්ලට ගන්නෙමු.
නව ශ්‍රී ලංකාවක් ගොඩනැගීමේ මේ දැවැන්ත ජාතික ව්‍යායාමයට සියලුම දෙනාගේම සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්නයි කියලා මම බොහොම කාරුණික විල්ලීමක් කරනවා.
ඔබතුමා ජනාධිපති වුණාට පස්සේ විධායක ජනාධිපති ක්‍රමය අපොසි කරනවද?
ජනාධිපති ක්‍රමය පිළිබඳව ඒ ආරම්භ කරපු වැඩපිළිවෙල අපි සියලුම පාර්ශ්වයන්ගේ සහයෝගයේ අනුමැතිය සහිතව ඉදිරියට ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්නට සැදී පැහැදී සිටිනවා.
ජනාධිපති මෛත්‍රීපාල සිරිසේන මහත්තයාගේ පාර්ශවයේ ඔබතුමාට සහාය දෙන්න આવොත් ඒ සහාය ගන්නවද?
දේශපාලන තලය තුල මම විශ්වාස කරන ප්‍රතිපත්තීන් පිළිගන්නා වූ සියලුම දේශපාලන පක්ෂවලට දේශපාලන බලවේගවලට අපේ පුළුල් සන්ධානය තුල ඉඩක් තිබෙනවා.
අපේක්ෂකත්වය ලබා දෙන විදිහට මොනවාරි කොන්දේසි ඉදිරිපත් වුණාද?
කිසිම කොන්දේසියක් නැහැ.
සම්දානයක් විදිහට අධ්‍යය ලකුණෙන් ඔබතුමා ජනාධිපතිවරණයට ඉදිරිපත් වෙන සම්බන්ධයෙන් එක ගැටයක් තියෙනවද නැත්නම් සලකුණේ වෙනස්කමක් මොකක් හරි යෝජනාවක් මේ කතා බහට ලක් කරලා
නැහැ. අපි අන්තිමටම සාකච්ඡා වුණු ආකාරයට අවබෝධ වුණු ආකාරයට අපි හංසයා ලකුණෙන් තමයි ඉදිරිපත් වෙන්නේ.
කිසකෙස් යනවාද විසඳුම දින 6න් පුරාණයේ පටන් භාවිතා කරන ඉපැරණි ශාකසාර වට්ටුරුවකට අනුව නිපදවන ගානීෂා hair growth oil සියලුම ෆාමසි සහ වෙළඳ සැල් වලින්.
Now, in the meantime, presidential contender of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, former Defence Secretary Gotabaya Rajapaksa, pledges to introduce a simplified tax system in order to free the public from unreasonable tax burden. The former Defence Secretary made this remark during the National Convention of the Business Community in Colombo today.
The National Convention of the Business Community was held in Colombo today under the patronage of opposition leader Mahinda Rajapaksa and the presidential contender of the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna, Gotabaya Rajapaksa.
We understand that certain taxes are very unfair. Under our government, we will not only reduce taxes, but will also introduce a simple tax system. Businessmen and banks have closer relations, and we expect banks to encourage entrepreneurs and not discourage them. We will research on the restrictions posed on the banking system, and we will amend those laws and regulations to aid the economic development in a positive manner. Not only Ranil, but the entire government should be held responsible for the bond scam. I should remind you that Sajith Premadasa too should be held responsible in this regard. He is talking about the dawn of a Premadasa era. I do not know whether you are aware of a Premadasa era. We remember pyres of tyres. We can't allow the dawn of such an era.
Meanwhile, the duo also presided over the National Convention of Professional Charmers.
These professionals face various problems as they have been held under litigation for having possessed equipment they need for their profession. It is important to provide them with the security they need to carry on their profession. Sajith Premadasa has now entered the presidential election contest. He has not spoken a single word regarding the economy but housing. No opinion on the issue of the North and East either. He has no understanding on the country's development. Everyone is aware the consequences of voting for the Swan last time. We can also imagine the repercussions of voting for the Swan this time as well. Chairman of the Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapre, is critical of the fact that there aren't any regulations in Sri Lanka on political financing, which makes it harder for the body to monitor and take action over any misdeeds. He did, however, concede that there are sufficient laws in place to address misuse of state power and resources. Addressing a memorial today, Deshapre also alluded to the rights of certain factions of society whose opportunity to vote is not secured through legislation.
A memorial of late Director of Monitoring and Review of Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Tusita Samarasekara, was held in Colombo today, where Chairman of the Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapre, delivered the guest lecture titled New Trends Adversely Impacting on Free and Fair Nature of Elections.
රාජ්‍ය බලය සහ රාජ්‍ය සම්පත් අයිතු පරිහරණය වළක්වන්න ප්‍රමාණවත් නීති තියෙනවා.
There are enough laws to control misuse of state resources and state power, but there aren't laws to control political financing. The Parliamentary Ordinance of 1946 states that an expenditure report must be produced within a month after an election. It used to be that a candidate can spend ₹1 per 3 registered voters. There were people who lost their civic rights when they didn't produce that report. But today we don't have a limit or any expenditure report. Fortunately, the President had presented a cabinet paper addressing these issues, and all recommendations are now with the Attorney General. And hopefully we will be able to implement this by the next parliamentary election. Through this, we can also control the use of foreign funds in elections.
A few years ago, the European Court of Human Rights, they said that prisoners have a right to vote, and that is under the European Convention of Human Rights, especially remand prisoners, because they're not even convicted of an offence yet.
We have received that complaint about the remand prisoners. According to our law, we have only the system for the advance voting, only the postal voting. That is only for the officers who are engaging with the election duties or security personnel. Otherwise, our supporting services, postal, CTV, railway and other institutions. Not even the remand prisoners. Doctors, nurses and the attendants who are working in the hospital on the election day, they can go to vote. And journalists and overseas voting. Not even migrant workers, embassy staff. We have proposed and make some cabinet drafts, advance voting system we have to introduce. That is outside the polling station.
Now, a disabled war veteran who had been engaged in a fast unto death in front of the Fort railway station was admitted to Colombo National Hospital. It is reported that another soldier had taken his place in the fast unto death. Disabled war veterans, the families of the fallen, launched the protest on the 11th of this month, demanding the authorities provide their pension benefits even after they reached the age of 55. On Tuesday, the Cabinet approved a pension equal to the last salary even after retirement for all the members of armed forces, police and special task force who have been disabled due to the war. However, the protesting war veterans rejected the Cabinet decision and continued with their protest, while 4 disabled war veterans commenced a fast unto death, demanding that that necessary provisions be made for their wives or relatives of the family to receive the pension even after they pass away. Now, Commander of the Sri Lanka Army, Lieutenant General Shavindra Silva, believes Sri Lanka's growth in computer literacy makes the country vulnerable to misinformation. He said this while addressing the Cybersecurity Summit held in Colombo recently.
The warfare has evolved from generations to generations, and today the powerful nations concentrate on network-centric warfare and cyber warfare as the space is becoming weapon launching pad. With the recent technological advancements, the Army has made transformation of its communication capabilities and intelligent activities, because cyberspace forms an irregular battlefield in the fields of economy, industry, culture, society, religion and national security. The Army, with the signal component, has taken measures to develop Army's electronic warfare capabilities to protect our data networks and systems from cyber threats. Further, I'm happy to say that we are ready to assist government authorities also if and when unseen cyber forces attempt to attack or threaten national data and communication networks. Social media have also become serious concern for national security. As Sri Lankan computer literacy rate and internet penetration is growing, our people are vulnerable for misinformation. Many elements will try to propagate misinformation and destabilize the social cohesion.
The United Nations has finally followed through on one of its threats on the recent appointment of the new Army commander. Details coming up after this break. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, the deputy spokesperson for the UN Secretary General issued a statement yesterday on the decision of the UN Department of Peace Operations to ban the Sri Lankan military from participating in future peacekeeping operations. Following this decision, all Sri Lankan peacekeepers currently stationed are to be repatriated with immediate effect. This move comes in the wake of international condemnation of the appointment of Lieutenant General Shavindra Silva as Sri Lanka's army commander. The concerns relate to alleged human rights abuses during the final stages of the humanitarian operation, leading to the defeat of the terrorist group LTTE in 2009. Sri Lanka's Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ravinath Arisinghe, is scheduled to take this matter up with the UN Under-Secretary General tomorrow.
The United Nations yesterday decided to ban Sri Lankan armed forces personnel from peacekeeping operations. This comes on the heels of Lieutenant General Shavindra Silva's appointment as Sri Lanka's army commander, a move that the government has insisted is a sovereign decision of the head of state and not open to interference. Sri Lanka's permanent representative to the United Nations, Ambassador ALA Aziz, also communicated this position in Geneva at the UNHRC earlier this month. Sri Lanka, a member of the United Nations Special Committee on Peacekeeping Operations, has been deploying military personnel on peacekeeping missions to conflict zones around the world since 1960, leading to its rank of 43 on the list of global peacekeeper contributors. As of now, over 450 Sri Lankan peacekeepers are engaged in operations overseas. Executive Director of the Centre for Policy Alternatives, Dr. Pakisoti Saravanamuthu, labelled the move punitive sanctions brought on by Sri Lanka's failure to investigate the allegations levelled against the newly appointed commander of the Sri Lanka Army.
These allegations should be investigated, and that the body of the Sri Lankan Army, the integrity of that body should not be brought into disrepute by the appointment of an individual of this nature. So it is up to Sri Lanka to ensure that everything that it does in respect of its armed forces, etc., is above suspicion and befitting the standards that the UN aspires to with regard to its peacekeeping forces. And so, in effect, it's almost like a punitive sanction against us.
Army spokesperson Brigadier Sumit Athapattu, speaking to First at 9 on the development, said that the Sri Lanka Army hasn't been officially communicated the decision and the move will have no impact on the military.
We don't worry much about on this, and I think there will be no impact. The issue has no relationship with the military reputation. We have 454 peacekeepers, which includes a hospital and about 30 observers and staff officers. There are 3 active contingents. One is in Lebanon, one is in Mali, and one is in South Sudan. The Mali contingent is doing convoy protection, and Lebanon, they do force protection, and there's a hospital. The convoy protection itself a humanitarian operation, and they have helped them in natural disaster. Our military medical corps people, they do a hospital there. Those are all humanitarian operations.
Now, the Department of Meteorology says that atmospheric conditions are turning favourable given the heavy rainfall in recent days that had hampered daily life and displaced many. According to the Disaster Management Centre, with the decrease of water levels in the rivers Nilwala, Ging and Kalu, the flood situation will reduce gradually.
Favourable conditions were witnessed in many areas including Colombo today, which were battered by the heavy showers in recent days. Despite a decrease in rainfall, a few areas in Galle were seen submerged after being inundated by heavy rain during the past few days. Meanwhile, steps were taken to widen the estuary of the Madampa River this morning, as few areas including Ambalangoda, Teldeniya, Maha Ambalangoda and Keraminiya were inundated due to the overflowing of the Madampa River. Meanwhile, floods in many parts of the Mathura district have gradually receded, but the situation along several roads and low-lying areas are the same, as they still remain underwater. Meanwhile, over 40,000 people displaced owing to the inclement weather are still being sheltered at 80 temporary locations. Meanwhile, a new research published in the Asian Development Review Journal of the Asian Development Bank has found that Sri Lanka spends a staggering $19 million annually on healthcare due to floods and droughts. According to the study, the western and central provinces bore the brunt of it, followed by the southern and northwestern provinces.
The Ministry of Finance today announced that the monthly salary of all public servants are to be increased by a minimum amount of 3,000 and a maximum of 24,000 rupees per month, effective from January 2020, as per the recommendations of the Special Commission on Revising Salaries of the Public Sector appointed by the President. Issuing a media communique, the ministry said the increment is in addition to the salary increment which was granted up to 107% by 2020, comparing to the basic salary that prevailed in 2015. It added that as a result of this new salary increment, salary anomalies that existed in different sectors of the public service will be removed. President Maithripala Sirisena appointed a 15-member salary review commission headed by S. Ranugge to make recommendations to remove the salary anomalies in the public sector. Now, the Spices and Allied Products Producers and Traders Association is accusing India of imposing an unrealistic minimum import price on Sri Lanka pepper and areca nut, which in turn they say is resulting in negligible exports. In a statement, the SAPTA said that Sri Lanka exported around 75% of pepper exports and almost 100% of its areca nut exports to India, adding that the minimum export price on pepper is 500 Indian rupees, whereas the local market is 200 Indian rupees. The association also said that in case of areca nut, Indian importers are also finding it difficult to clear the cargo at the port of entry. They added that recently the Indian Government Authority has instructed their Phytosanitary Department not to issue certificates for the export of clove stems, an absolute requirement for the clearing of cargo in India. SAPTA said stocks of these commodities remain unsold, with farmers who continue to agitate with price declining and question the point of having free trade agreements if such restrictions prevent exports. Now, in the meantime, the Export Development Board and the spice sector officially launched the Ceylon Spice Master Brands, the country's latest national brand. The move comes in the backdrop of the government targeting exports worth $880 million from the spice and concentrates sector by 2022. Speaking at the event, the Minister of Development Strategies and International Trade, Malik Samaravikrama, revealed the government's plans to uplift the country's spice industry, including taking action against anyone harming the image of Ceylon spices.
Branding of spices is a priority action item in the NES to achieve a set export target of US dollars 880 million from the spices and concentrates sector by 2020. Our brands, products coming from Sri Lanka, must be known for a commitment to high quality, high ethical standards and strong environment sustainability credentials. That will be a unique differentiator. EDB is working with cinnamon industry stakeholders to obtain geographical indication (GI) for Ceylon cinnamon in the European Union. EDB has worked in coordination with UNIDO and relevant government and private sector stakeholders such as Department of Export Agriculture, the Spice Council and Spices and Allied Products Producers and Traders Association to meet technical requirements to obtain GI in the European Union. We are hopeful of getting this soon. We must also tackle the more recent challenge of the sharp drop in cinnamon prices faced by growers and peelers. This poses a significant long-term risk to the industry. Continued low prices will discourage cinnamon growing. We will be taking a deeper look into these areas and see what further measures are needed to be taken. I have also come to know of recent incidents where exports of genuine Ceylon cinnamon have been bundled with imported cassia, the great pretender, and these shipments have been rejected by the buyers. Similar issues have emerged in pepper and cloves. We will not tolerate it. Anyone breaking the rules and causing reputational damage to Ceylon spices will be dealt with in the strongest terms. We cannot let the greed of a few risk the livelihood of thousands.
Now to bring you a market update, shares rose for a second session today as banks and diversified stocks continued their rally after the central bank asked lenders to cut interest rates. The all-share price index ended 0.18% up at 5,772.76. Market turnover was 273.8 million rupees, well below this year's daily average of around 661.7 million rupees so far. Foreign investors were net buyers for the second straight session, buying a net 46.3 million rupees worth of shares. Here's a brief look at today's market performance.
In the bond market, the yield curve remained broadly unchanged, while the overall market witnessed limited activities with thin volumes. In the equity market, the index continued to be in the positive territory with positive sentiment for the second consecutive day, predominantly on price gains made in the big cap John Case holdings. For the second straight session, there was a net foreign inflow that was recorded, though overall foreign participation was pretty low.
Now taking a look at the currency market, the Sri Lankan rupee closed at 0.16% weaker at 181 rupees and 85 cents to 182 rupees against the US dollar, compared with yesterday's close of 181 rupees and 55 to 70 cents. Now let's take a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies around the world. The latest on Benjamin Netanyahu's attempt to be Israel's next Prime Minister, coming up after this break. Welcome back. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu has had a surprising reversal of election fortunes and looks set to head for a record fifth term as Israeli Prime Minister. Although having lost the election to rival Benny Gantz by a single seat, the subsequent electoral deadlock that resulted has given the embattled Prime Minister one more chance at political survival. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin tasked incumbent Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday with forming the country's 36th government following the deadlocked 17th September election that yielded inconclusive results. Gantz had 54 lawmakers recommending him, but 10 of them, lawmakers from the Arab-Jewish joint list, said they will not join a possible governing coalition under Gantz. According to the Israeli election law, Netanyahu has 28 days to form a cabinet. Now in sports, England ran through 7 tries against the US team in a clinical display of offensive play to clip the Eagles' wings in a 45-7 drubbing during their encounter at the Rugby World Cup. Billy Vunipola and Luke Cowan-Dickey scored first-half tries from driving mauls after skipper George Ford went under the post after 6 minutes. 4 more in the second half were a fitting reward for a much improved performance in the heat and humidity of Kobe. England's eventual victory was also notable for the tournament's first red card shown to US flanker John Quill for a blatant shoulder charge on Owen Farrell's head. England face Argentina next in what would be their toughest game yet. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.